Theatre, the magic of the stage, something truly marvellous to appreciate. Some of them even come with their own ghost stories surrounding them, which can usually be absolutely terrifying. Number 1. I am currently working the soundboard for a production at a large theatre in Atlanta. I moved here to pursue acting, and the soundboard job is part of an acting apprenticeship that I have at the theatre. My job is to sit in the booth and overlook the stage and run all of the sound cues during the performance. It is just me running the sound cues, and my stage manager running the light cues in the booth during the show. We wear headsets in order to communicate quietly, but still hear each other. Because of the construction of the booth and its distance from the stage, it is nearly impossible to hear the show over the sound of the audience, but we need to be able to hear the actors in order to know when to take each cue. The solution to this problem is a small microphone that hangs from the light grid above the stage that is fed into a small monitor inside the booth. Keep in mind that the microphone is hanging from the ceiling. So we were running the show as usual, and everything was going perfectly, until we get to a particular funny scene in the play. The audience were really into it, laughing, clapping, and screaming in their approval. As a result, the actors on stage had to project quite loudly in order to be heard. Needless to say, it was deafening in our booth, with all of the sound that was flooding through the little monitor. And then out of nowhere, clear as a bell, cutting through all of the other racket, we both hear a young, scared female voice clearly say, This went on long enough for both my stage manager and I to register the sound, look at each other, and for me to take off my headset to make sure it wasn't someone on another headset backstage. My first thought was that it was someone in the audience talking on a cell phone that happened to be right beside the microphone, and that must be why it was so much louder than all of the other sounds. But then I realised that the microphone is in the light grid, at least 12 feet away from the actors and the audience. Someone, or something, was right beside that microphone speaking into it. My stage manager missed the next light cue. Number 2. I did theatre during school. A little backstory on the drama department of the high school. The story that all new drama club members are told is of Bobby, the auditorium ghost. He's even been featured in the school paper. Cheesy, I know. And it's said that Bobby was a thespian that had graduated from the school and was on his way back to see a production. Before he could ever arrive though, he got into a tragic car accident off a stretch of highway right by the school and unfortunately passed away. It's said that his spirit apparently finished making its way to the high school and has been there in the theatre ever since. There have always been things that happened with no explanation. Doors that were unlocked suddenly became locked out of nowhere. Props vanishing or being moved during rehearsals only to appear again randomly before the show started, as well as more. During one particular show though, there was a creepy clown statue prop that was in one of the restrooms. It's your standard birthday clown, but looked like something from a show that would have happened in Renaissance times. A fellow actor remembered passing it right before we all went on set, and this called for all actors on stage. However, once the scene was finished and we all started going back down, we heard a scream from the backstage as the heavy clown statue that was previously in the bathroom somehow moved into the poor girl's dressing room. We had no explanation for how this happened, as there was nobody backstage during this time. Number 3. This was a small town theatre that was about 60 miles outside of London. It was built in the 1980s and tacked onto a lovely big 15th century mansion which had been turned into an arts centre. I worked there for about 2 years in the early 20s, and this is my experience. I was working backstage during a youth show, and one of my jobs was to usher about 12 child actors onto a platform on stage in time for an upcoming scene. I had about 5 minutes to do this in the dark, whilst the audience's attention was drawn to someone's action taking place under a spotlight in the preceding scene. The kids had to walk across a backstage platform about 20 feet from the ground, then go through a plywood door onto the stage. On this night, we were halfway through the show's run, so had done this dozens of times before, including once that day. So the kids walked across the platform and went to open the door. But they couldn't. It was locked. Now this was a makeshift door with no handle or latch, just a lock and key. The only person with this key was the duty manager, who'd I'd seen unlock the door earlier that day. Also, suddenly, the door was rock hard when I pushed against it. Normally, because it was plywood, it gave at the top and bottom whenever it locked. Whatever, I was running out of time, so I figured that the duty manager must somehow have relocked the door. I radioed the front desk, who said that he'd been working in the projector room in the cinema for the last 2 hours, but they would send him right over. I waited for a minute, knowing that it would take him at least 5 to get there, when the door just swung open in front of me. As the door opened, there was no one on the other side. I quickly peeked through, and it was empty. I was quite unnerved, but just assumed that the deputy manager had just gotten out of there way too quickly before I could have seen. The show went on as normal, but afterwards, when I spoke to the deputy manager, he told me that he had not had the chance to go down because of a personal emergency. I looked at him in disbelief, but never told him about the creepy sensation I got when that door opened completely independently. I have no idea what to make of it. Number 4. This happened to me in 2001. I was an intern for a theatre in Glendale that used to be a Mason temple. It was 7 stories, with a lower level that was used as a restaurant and nightclub in the 1930s. It had gutted restaurant seats. The second floor used to be an old movie room, and on the bottom level was a prop cage that the theatre had built to contain thousands of props, like tea sets and spoons and stuff like that, since a classical theatre company ran the theatre and they performed Shakespeare, Molière and Dickens. One night, I was working late with the technical director in a room adjacent to the prop cage, right by the staircase that led up to the main room of the theatre. I heard props moving. It sounded like cups were knocking against each other or clicking, like they were just rolling on the floor. The tech director went to investigate and saw nothing. but when he left the room, I heard footsteps coming down the stairs, although the theatre was empty. We waited, and when he returned, we checked the stairs, and nobody was there. I was getting freaked out, and confessed that I thought it could be a ghost. He just laughed, and said that there were no such thing as ghosts, when suddenly, we both heard footsteps much louder this time stomping down the stairs. Crazy loud, and very threatening. We looked at each other in the eyes, and then something truly weird happened that I will never forget. Someone stomped on the floor above us, and scratched the side of the walls, but as if it was scratching from the inside, as if they were scratching the pipes almost. And then we heard a really loud bang. The tech director and I looked at each other in shock, and then we fled that building faster than anyone had ever seen. We couldn't believe what happened. We'd heard stories about footsteps and other actors seeing ghosts, but this was truly bizarre. What kind of ghost stomps on the ceiling, scratches on the pipes in the walls, and makes loud banging noises? We had to return a few days later to finish working, and the moment that we were alone in there, it started stomping again in the room above. It was completely empty, since it was Christmas break, and no one was going to be in the theatre then. We used the keys to let ourselves in and out, and locked it to make sure that no one wandered in. The tech director called to it again, making fun of it like he had done before, when suddenly I felt fear. I heard it again, the noise of scratching from the walls. We again fled. I was absolutely terrified and didn't want to hang around in that old Masonic church any longer. Months later, a group of us closed the theatre after a show on the 3rd floor. We turned off all of the lights and locked the doors. We stood outside talking to each other about the show, when we all heard books dropping on the 2nd floor. We were standing under the window of the 2nd floor, and we all heard large books being dropped. An entire group of people heard it. Personally, that was my last encounter with the ghost, but one actress told me that she looked up one night and heard a bell ringing in another room. She quietly walked down the stairs from the 3rd floor to the main floor, with the bell noise getting louder and louder, until it was sounding as if it were right in her ear. But when she approached where the noise was coming from, no one was there. She turned around and ran out, and she said that she would never lock up or be alone in there again. She told us that she'd also seen clothes hangers fly across the room in the middle of stage performances, and the 2 other actors were standing with her in the wings, waiting to go on when they saw the hangers from the costume rack fly across the room. When my internship was over, I never returned to that theatre, but I saw the technical director many years later who eventually quit. He said that when he worked late on sets, he would hear his tools moving, or if he was swaying wood, he would hear something move in another room, and when he would inspect, of course, nothing would be there. It became too much for him and he quit, and I don't blame him. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I love the theatre, and one thing that always captivated me, I think it's called the Drury Lane Theatre in London, is apparently haunted, and they say that if an actor sees a ghost in the stand during their performance, it is the highest honour they can receive. It's quite funny. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you thought in the comment section below, as I'd love to hear them. Have any of you ever seen anything strange in a theatre? If you want your story read on this channel, please submit your story to the email found in the description. But for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.